Welcome to the Love is Our Nature podcast. Here I am again with a wonderful, wonderful guest, Pippa. Let me tell you a little bit about Pippa. Phillipa Attwood, better known as Pippa, was born and raised in the UK. She spent several years visiting and living in the Amazon rainforest with indigenous communities after a 10-year career in project management and strategic development. During her time in the Amazon, Pippa quickly realized her innate affinity with the forest. She was also witness to large-scale destruction and deforestation, which led to her current career with international reforestation organization Tree Nation, and several private projects through her own nonprofit, Futuro Nativo. Through Futuro Nativo, she supports indigenous-led projects in land regeneration, agroforestry, and music production. That is amazing. Welcome. How are you?
Thank you. Great. Thank you.
Great.
Excited to be here today.
Amazing. Amazing. I'm excited to have you. Thank you for joining this episode of Love is Our Nature. And we're just going to get to chat, talk, get to know you better, get to know each other better. And there's a couple things that bio does not say, which is you live in Costa Rica now, number one. And number two, somehow the universe did its thing to where we're housemates.
Right.
So, how did you get to Costa Rica?
So how did I get to Costa Rica? Well, I was in Brazil, actually, in the Amazon with the indigenous community that I was living with at the time, just before the pandemic hit. And I had decided to go back to the UK for a few weeks to visit family, right at that turning point. And when I had gotten to the UK, I'd realized that all the borders around the world were closing, and the UK was not the place that I wanted to be for any period of time. And I had friends from New York who were here in Costa Rica who had been living here for a few months prior, and had already been inviting me here when I was still in the Amazon. And so I decided that it was a good place to jump to just before the border closed. And that
So
was
you made it
16
just in
months
time.
ago. Yeah, we made it just in time, just before the day before the border closed.
Wow,
Yeah,
that's amazing.
and I've been here ever since.
Yeah, and had you been here before?
I came here once before, and it was maybe 6 years ago now, almost 7, when I originally left the UK, the very beginning of 2015, and I flew into Mexico and started to travel south down through the Americas. And so I passed through Costa Rica during that time, but it was only for about 3 weeks, and I spent majority of the time in South America.
Okay.
Yeah.
And those 3 weeks in Costa Rica, where in Costa Rica were they?
It was just through the mainland. It was,
Okay.
it came in through Nicaragua. I'd been on a motorbike journey through Nicaragua with a friend of mine.
Nice.
And then we entered through the north of Costa Rica and came through, and then I went to Panama afterwards. Yeah.
Amazing. Okay. And now we're housemates here at Templo Lila.
Templo Lila!
This magical place where we currently are. We are filming this in Santa Teresa, Costa Rica. Actually, just in the outskirts of Santa Teresa, Costa Rica, where we live here in Templo Lila, along with our wonderful third housemate, Steve, aka DJ Soul Love, which we will have in the Love is Our Nature podcast very soon. So, what's it like to live with me?
It's fun. I'm always laughing, and that's very important to me. Is fun and laughter and joy, and so you're bringing in a lot of that into my life, Caesar. So I'm really happy about that.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, and I love sharing food with you and cooking and doing all of the domestic things together.
Yeah, I love when we have these family lunches by surprise, or family breakfasts or dinners. One of us steps into the kitchen, and Steve will come out, and he'll start peeking, and then the other one comes out, and before you know it, all three of us are just cooking up this whole meal, and it comes out amazing. So yeah. How did we get here to Templo Lila? I can say first. So I met Pippa through Darren Austin Hall. Darren has been like my gateway into Santa Teresa, this whole beautiful community here in Costa Rica, which feels like a completely different dimension. How long have you known Darren?
I know Darren I think almost 16 months. So he's one of the first people I met when I got here to Costa Rica.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And did you meet him at that retreat, Sound of Silence, or?
I didn't. It was just after that. So Darren stayed at a place called Casa Cata just after
Uh-huh.
that, and one of my friends owned the house next door, and he came around one day and he sung us a song. Mushroom Jesus is the name of the song, and if you're very lucky, you might catch him one day, and he'll sing it to you.
Mm,
And that's how we first met.
that's
Yeah,
amazing.
yeah, and
Yeah.
that's the link in all of this. I think
Yeah.
is him specifically for this house at least.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Darren, he's
We
quite,
love you, Darren.
yeah, I love you, Darren. If you haven't seen episode 8 or heard episode 8 of the Love is Our Nature podcast, highly recommend it. Tell the whole story of how I met Darren. And yeah, so this was where Darren lived. And I told him, if you ever need a roommate, uh, I'm first in line. You know? So here I am. And it's just magical. So, and Pippa, he took over his spot while he's down south doing his own inner work. He's diving deeper into this creative sabbatical, and we're all holding space for him from here. So that's how you wound up here, yeah.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. So we're sharing space right now. I'm subleasing his room, which
Hmm.
is full of lots of love and great
Yeah.
vibrations. I'm happy to be there and happy
Yeah.
to be sharing space with you and Steve.
Yeah. Same. Same. We get to we're gonna ask you a ton of questions about all your projects, which is something I really want to learn about. But before that, um, to get to know you a little bit better. Um, the what was it like for you, like in that 10-year career in strategic development, project management?
Actually, it was really great. I was very young. I started working at the age of 16. I did not go to college. I went straight out of high school and into work,
Hmm.
which is kind of unusual, But I landed into a administration position, but I had a really good mentor. His name was Jake, and he was my manager at the time, and he saw potential, and he allowed me to work as an assistant on the project that he
Hmm.
was working on. And so at a very young age I started to learn about project management and strategic development, um, and then I kind of just grew into that very organically, that career. And at the age of 21, I then had 5 years' experience. I was working as a project manager. I had been responsible for my own projects at that point. And he suggested to me that it would be a good idea to go to get a qualification of
Hmm.
some sort. And so I was very lucky. I applied to a university that was actually running a master's degree, and one of the prerequisites for that was to have 5 years or more experience within that specific profession, which I had at that
Hmm.
point. And so I was really lucky. I got accepted as an associate student, which means that they needed to check that I could write at an acceptable standard, and I could, and so what that allowed me to do is to grow into that career at a young age. And
Hmm.
so I was in a senior management position at a very young age, and so it allowed me a lot of knowledge and experience, um, kind of beyond my years, if you
Hmm.
like.
Yeah.
And then what that allowed me to do was kind of get ahead, right? So then I had had 10 years. I had moved into private industry. I was working for one of the UK's biggest infrastructure firms at the age of 23.
Hmm.
And I stayed with them for 2 years. And what happened during that time is that I learned a lot about the business world, about the corporate world, how to build business, how to look ahead, how to see a business and take it to the next level, how to improve it, how efficient it can be.
Hmm.
And so it gave me a lot of life skills that I'm still using today, but it's in a very different context.
Hmm. Amazing. So, shifting into that different context, what took you to the Amazon?
Well, the journey actually started in Tanzania, in Kilimanjaro, and so I climbed Kilimanjaro. I think it was 2012, and what happened during that trip was that I kind of just saw at that point that there was so much more to the world, and when you summit on that mountain, at least for me, there was a huge energetic shift. And at the time I didn't even use the terminology energetic shift. I didn't know
Mm.
what that meant. Now I can use that term,
Mm-hmm.
and it just opened me up. And then I started to think about, well, what else can I do? Where else can I go?
Mm.
And so during the career, I did take other trips into India and into Europe, etc. And and then there just came a point that I said, okay, this is kind of not enough. I really
Mm-hmm.
want to go deeper into exploring the world. And so what I decided was that I would travel.
Mm.
And so I had a friend, Judy, and she had just gotten back from her trip into South America, and she was so excited about it.
And just a quick question: up until this point, you hadn't gone into like the plant medicine world at all,
I
right?
hadn't gone into the plant medicine world. I hadn't even meditated. I can remember one of my friends was like meditating when we went on this trip to Europe that I just mentioned, and I was like, "What is she doing?" Like, I was very confused by it, and I was,
Why is she sitting there quietly doing nothing? What a waste of time.
yeah, exactly. She was just by the lake, and I was like, "Judy, are you okay?" Like, I was totally not in that world at all.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, but what really changed things for me was going on that traveling trip,
Mm.
and she was another inspiration for doing that.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, I've always had a natural affinity with with nature and the forest and going out. And so as a child, I would draw a lot of the time things in
Mm.
nature and trees and things like that. But it was kind of something that got covered up, right?
Mm.
And then through the travel, it kind of exploded within me again. And going back to your original question, why the Amazon? Well, the Amazon.
Well, hang on. What happened in that travel? Like what was the epiphany or the moment?
Well, it's like the Amazon is the place I need to go.
Sure, or that
Yeah,
set you on this new path. Because man, maybe it started at Mount Kilimanjaro there in Tanzania,
right.
right? But then this travel seems like it expanded something. What was that?
It expanded a lot, and so I think one of the first things that really started to open me up, specifically within meditation and more of a conscious way of moving through the world, was being in Guatemala at Lake
Mm-hmm.
Atitlan. I
Mm.
went to an esoteric school called Las Piramides,
Mm.
and so I started to build on all of those skills that I really had no idea about before I left.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I started, continuing along that journey and along that path. And prior to Guatemala, I had met my very dear sister, Adara Luz, and her father, Eugenio, in Mexico. And it was one of the first, they were one of the first people that I had met on the journey. And I can remember Eugenio, he had a diary, I still have it, and he drew me a map. He
Mm-hmm.
was like, "This is where we live. We live in the middle of the Amazon." And he was like, "You have to fly to this place on the border with Colombia, and then you have to take a boat for 5 days, and then you have to get off, and then you have to get on another boat for
Mm.
another 2 days." And I was like, "I'm never going to take this trip. And never.
Yeah.
This sounds too crazy."
Yeah.
And by the time I had moved through Guatemala and Costa Rica and gotten down into Colombia, I said, "You know what? I'm gonna take that trip. I'm gonna take
Mm.
that trip into the Amazon." And at that point, I had Temazcal experiences, which is basically for those who don't know, it's like a dome covered
Mm-hmm. It's like a
uh,
sweat lodge.
a sweat lodge. Yeah, exactly. So it's representing the womb of the earth, right? And so I'd had these different experiences that had started to open me up, and I
Tell
had
me
started
more
to
about
learn
that.
about plant medicine,
Uh-huh.
although I hadn't
Uh-huh.
actually experienced it at that point.
Okay. Where was that sweat lodge experience?
The first one was, I think, in Colombia.
Uh-huh. I haven't done sweat lodge. It's one of the things that somehow has escaped me up until now. I haven't really had an opportunity to step into it, but I hear so much about them, and I definitely want to do one. What was it like for you? First few sweat lodge experiences.
Intense,
Mm-hmm.
really intense. And these amazing these volcanic rocks that go into the fire outside, which are caretaken by the fire
Yeah.
by the fire carer, are put into the sweat lodge in the Temazcal, and so it's you know physically it's very hot, and so it's intense in that way. And then spiritually, what it does is it magnifies anything that's within that
Mm.
space and within that womb. And so
Wow.
yeah, it really wakens some things up inside
Mm-hmm.
of you that are deeply within you,
Mm-hmm.
because you're pushing your body to one of its limits. And
Amazing.
so I think whenever you do that, it really stirs something up inside of you and allows things to energetically to move and to shift.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah, it reminds me a bit of yin yoga. I did my first yin yoga where you hold a pose or upwards to like 5 minutes. And I have not been a very disciplined practitioner of yoga yet, and it was quite challenging for me. But this sounds like it's a whole new level. Really looking forward to my experience with it. Okay,
yeah, and
great.
it's a lot of chanting as well. So there's certain, and within that it's prayer, right? And so
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
you're kind of calling upon the spirits as well when you're in that container
Yeah,
to be with you, and they
yeah,
are present. And so that, again, there are lots of layers to the Temazcal and to that kind of experience, but I would recommend you going if you
yeah.
haven't.
Yeah, I'm going to. So, okay, so then you headed to the Amazon. You take the boat trip.
Right, so I took the flight into a place called Leticia, which is on the tri-border between Brazil, Peru, and Colombia.
Okay.
And I took a 5-day boat journey down the Amazon River
Mm.
on my own. It
On
was,
your own.
yeah, I wasn't with anyone. I just arrived there on a
Wait, what?
flight
Like
on
you
my
did?
own.
Is it
I
rowing
mean,
or?
no. I mean, the boat was
Oh,
obviously
okay.
full of people, but I had
Oh, okay,
arrived there
okay.
on my own as a sole traveler.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, I bought my hammock when I was there, and that's what you sleep in for the 5 nights that you're on the boat. And it's like an ocean, like a sea of hammocks, and it's there are hardly any foreigners there.
So does the boat stop so people could get off and hang their hammocks
No,
up?
no. So all of the hammocks are on the boat. It's a
Oh,
ferry.
oh, okay, okay,
It's a
okay,
ferry,
okay.
okay? So it's quite a big boat. It moves
Yeah,
pretty slowly, and you sleep
yeah.
on the ferry. So it has 3 levels. First level is cargo, and then where you sleep, and then the top level is kind of the bar
Mm-hmm.
area where you can
Mm-hmm.
relax and look at the amazing view over the
Mm-hmm.
Amazon River. And so it's just full of families,
Mm.
Amazonian families, and not necessarily indigenous, but just river dwellers, people
Mm.
who live along the river. And so it would
Mm.
stop, and you would see all of these different communities, and that's how I entered the Amazon for the first time, and it was very beautiful, and I fell in love. And then once I got to Manaus, I stayed actually doing a work exchange for a couple of weeks, and then after that I continued the journey for the extra 2 days.
What kind of work did you do in that work exchange for a couple of weeks?
The work exchange, it was with like a jungle retreat center,
Mm-hmm.
and I just helped them with domestic things, but I also painted for them
Okay.
while I was there. So I think they still have a beautiful painting of that I created for them, hung up in the main room.
So you paint?
I paint.
Oh, what? I
Yeah,
didn't even know that.
yeah,
Okay, okay.
yeah.
Uh-huh.
And then I arrived 2 days later. I took the second boat to Santarém. And Santarém, you get off, and then you take a taxi to Alto de Chão. And Alto de Chão is where Adara Luz and her father Eugenio were, and
Mm-hmm.
that's what started my journey in the Amazon.
Mm.
Alto de Chão is an incredible place that is hidden, basically, and it has white sand beaches
What is
in
it called again?
Alto de Chão.
Is that Spanish
It's
or
Portuguese.
Portuguese?
It's Portuguese,
Which
yeah,
you speak, by the way. You speaks English and Portuguese and Spanish.
and Spanish, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And I didn't at that point
Yeah.
speak Portuguese, but now I do. And that, it has white sand beaches the sand is blown in from the Sahara.
Uh-huh.
The wind systems carry it in.
Oh, wow.
And so, when the river drops during the summer months, you have these like islands that appear.
Mm-hmm.
And I spent 3 months there, and I had my first experiences with ayahuasca there. It was the time that I was like, I had obviously heard and had opportunities to sit with ayahuasca prior
Yeah, let's
to
take a
that.
moment to address that, right? I
Mm-hmm.
always love addressing people's first experience with ayahuasca.
Mm.
That really is where this started, which I think most listeners at this point know. If you've heard any episodes prior, that the biggest message that I experienced, witnessed, saw, felt in my first ayahuasca ceremony is that love is our nature, right? If we
Mm-hmm.
could cut through through this dimension and see what it's made of, what the building blocks are of this reality, what I saw was love, right? And I learned that through communicating with my body, through interacting with my surroundings, with nature. And I want to hear about your first ayahuasca experience.
Yeah. My first ayahuasca experience. Well, I had three experiences very close together during that first period.
Mm-hmm.
Ayahuasca, I think, showed me and opened up the world of of spirit and of plants in a much deeper way than I had ever experienced before. One thing I can remember after sitting with ayahuasca is I was on one of these beaches that I just told you about, and just rolling around in the sand, and I picked up one single grain of sand,
Mm.
and I had it on my finger, and I remember thinking to myself, wow, this grain of sand holds the whole of the universe inside of it. Like one grain of sand
Mm.
is significant to everything else.
Yeah.
And it just, I don't know how to really explain that, but it's like whatever you see here, the physical body, we're all just a reflection of the infinite. And so it just allowed me this deep, profound sense of just belonging. Every cell of my body and everything that I was looking at was all just a reflection of itself and a reflection of each other. And so I was looking at that grain of sand, and it's like looking in a mirror.
Wow.
Which is crazy. But I was like, wow. And so I realized, like, I just, if I look at everything with that same sense of beauty that I can see that one grain of sand, that's how I want to see the world.
Mm. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Wow. All right, that's all, folks. We could just leave it at that. Wow. Great. What was it like for you going into it? Like, did you have second thoughts, doubts? Were you scared? Like, what?
No, it was, I mean, one thing I'll always say is like, if when it's the right time.
Mm-hmm.
I had opportunities before that to sit with ayahuasca, and I was like, no, it doesn't quite feel right, doesn't feel right. And then I got there and I was like, boom, it's completely right. Every part of me knew that it was the right decision. It was like a hell yeah, like it was like a full yes.
Mm.
No doubts, no fear, no real intentions other than just whatever the medicine wanted to show me. I had no
Mm.
expectations. And so I went into it in a very pure way.
Mm-hmm.
There was nothing, nothing surrounding it that I was trying to
Yeah.
gain from it.
Yeah.
And it was for me, it was perfect. I was in the heart of the Amazon.
Mm.
And it was actually not with indigenous community at that
Mm-hmm.
point, and I had not spent time with indigenous communities at that point. But it was with a master who's since passed away. But he'd been working with the medicine for 60 years of his life.
Mm.
And so there was no, it was just a very pure way to experience it, around the
Yeah.
fire, underneath the stars. Um,
How many people participated with you?
I think there were 12.
Okay.
Yeah, not many. But they, these are people who are living in this place in the middle of the Amazon.
Mm-hmm.
Mostly
Nice.
foreigners and some Brazilians.
Yeah. So that was one. You said you did a few back to back, like
3.
three.
Yeah, so there were 3 experiences in
And
that
what period
time.
of time?
All within like 2 weeks, I would
Okay.
say.
Mm-hmm.
And the time that I was just speaking about was actually the third time. So the
Mm-hmm.
first 2 times I felt like I was
Mm-hmm.
just opening up, and so the first time I was actually in a new center. And it wasn't open yet. It was a friend's place. They were inaugurating it really for the first time with the ayahuasca experience, just with close friends. And that was very light. It was very light, and I didn't feel much.
Mm-hmm.
So I continued, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I think as well. Have From what the stories that I listen to, or the people, is that they have such an expectation of ayahuasca, and sometimes she doesn't work like that. Sometimes she's like, no, be patient. I'm gonna like allow you into this world softly.
Mm.
Um,
Well, that's one of her biggest lessons too, right? Because I've seen that phenomenon too with some people. Like one of the biggest lessons is letting go of the attachment, right? Sometimes we go in with that big expectation that we become attached to. Okay, I'm gonna have like some big introspective journey,
mhm.
and like we're so caught up in the wanting of that drive doesn't allow the space for the medicine to truly and purely show you what it wants to show you. So then it kind of very gently waits till you're ready.
Yeah,
Would you say?
yeah, I
Yeah.
would say so. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And so that's what happened to me. I
Okay.
let go of that, and on the third experience, it's really when she showed me, what it is that at that point I needed to see.
Hmm. And could you say what it is that you saw that you're referring to, what you needed to see?
That particular time, I had like a life regression, and so I went back to some of my earliest memories as a child, which I had kind of forgotten about and kind of put into a mental block of
Mm.
not remembering.
Mm-hmm.
And so she allowed me to explore that, and some of it was happy, and some of it was challenging,
Mm-hmm.
as most experiences with ayahuasca are. And then she closed with this like everlasting sense of there's so much beauty in the world, and there's so
Mm.
much beauty in nature, and that's what I held with me.
Mm-hmm. Amazing. All right, wonderful. So then continue on taking us on this wonderful journey.
Right. So then at that point, I started to be introduced to Indigenous communities, and of course, by this point, I had completely fallen in love with the forest, and I was
Mm.
walking through the forest every day and sitting with the samauma tree, which is
Did you have stuff with you, like backpack
the
luggage?
cedar tree. Yeah, I had a backpack, but I was traveling pretty light. I was a
Yeah.
good traveler back in those days. Now it's not.
Yeah.
Now it's not the case. But yeah, I was traveling light. And anyway, I had arrived to see my friend Adara, and so I was
Mm-hmm.
staying in her beautiful house that she had just built at the time.
Mm. Your friend was living with these communities?
She's just well connected with them. So
Mm-hmm.
Adara, my good friend, she has an organization called AMZ Projects,
Mm-hmm.
and she was born in the Amazon, and her mother and father had met in Rio, and her father also runs a nonprofit called Alegria,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and she had grown up in the Amazon, and so she had been visiting indigenous communities all her life, and her father had made those introductions, and her uncle as well.
Mm.
And so uh, she already had those connections, so very generously she allowed me into that part of her world.
Mm. I see. Okay. And
It's
And then
called
what happened?
Saúde e Alegria. Sorry.
Saúde e Alegria.
Saudi Alegria, and they're doing amazing work and have been doing incredible work for the last, I think, 30 years within that area of the Amazon, bringing health and medical supplies to those that are difficult to get to.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Okay. And then what happened?
Then I had to leave. I got an opportunity.
After how long again?
I had been there at that point probably 4 months in Brazil.
Mm-hmm.
So a month to arrive there, and then 3 months I'd been living with Adara, and I had to leave. I got an opportunity with an organization called VESA, Volunteer Eco Students Abroad, who are based in Australia. And they bring university students out into several places in the world to do humanitarian and social projects and to explore those countries. And I got the job. I went over to Australia. But what happened when leaving was that I left by car at that point. I went to from Alta de Chão. I took a car to the airport in Santa Teresa, and I was heartbroken. I left the Amazon, and what I saw along this long straight road was one side completely dense jungle with all of this magic that had just been shown to me through the plant medicine, and the other side of the road was deforested. It was completely dead. There was no trees. It had been burnt. It was just devastated. And my heart just sank, and I completely fell apart in that moment. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, how can we as humans be doing this to nature? How can we just destroy it in such a bleak way? And like, how do we not know what we're kind of destroying here? And so it just started me along this track of like, wow, what can I do to prevent this happening? What can I do to work on good projects? How can I raise awareness about this that's happening? Because of course, if you're not in the Amazon and you don't have that life-changing experience where something completely shifts your reality, it's just not really part of your psyche, and it's just not something that you really care or worry about because you haven't had those experiences. So I was like, how do I bring this to those people who are not here with me but that should know about this?
Yeah, it's kind of, to me it sounds similar to like in the Western world. I lived in South Florida for 22 years. Like we tend to get desensitized to many things, like war, right? Like there's thousands and thousands of bombs dropped in the East, where women, children are all murdered, right? And it's like our own government's doing that, and like we just kind of go on about our lives because we're so desensitized somehow. And I could see how there's a similar phenomenon with things like this, like with deforestation in the Amazon and whatnot. So yeah, it's definitely, I can imagine the difference when you have that firsthand experience, like first being immersed in the beauty of it, right? Which Costa Rica happens to have a wonderful jungle scene as well, right? I've been lucky to experience a lot of that myself. I definitely want to go to the Amazon, so maybe you'll take me one day. I'll go visit you there. And yeah, from being immersed in it to then like seeing firsthand like the deforestation that had happened, like I could really see how connected you would be in that moment to that contrast, right? So you said you started wondering, okay, what can I do about this, right? So what were some of the things that you started contemplating at that point?
Yeah, so I was brokenhearted basically. I was
Yeah.
just like, wow, what can I do about this? And so I was like, I was already on this journey to Australia to work with VESA, which was actually, working towards humanitarian and environmental projects as well. And so I continued to do that. And after a month in Australia, presenting to different universities over there, and we went to Ecuador, which was where one of the projects was and still is, and it was Ecuadorian Amazon.
Mm-hmm.
Right, so it's. I still went back to the
Mm-hmm.
Amazon, and I went back there as a volunteer leader, and so it was my responsibility to take care of those student volunteers who came into the jungle, as their jungle guide. Okay, so at that point I was speaking Spanish. I'd learnt that during the first year of traveling through Latin America,
Wow.
and I was essentially the translator for the local jungle guides, and the volunteers who were arriving to work on the projects. And so I had been brought back to the Amazon, in a different country. And it deepened my understanding of the plants and the network, because I was spending so much time with these locals who had so much knowledge and translating for them every day. So I learned a lot. And we also, with the students, were in a position to introduce them to shamanic principles. And so we had one of the local shamans come and perform a cleansing ritual. Of course, it wasn't the time to sit them down with ayahuasca, but we had a cleansing ritual with them, with one of the shamans. And so they would come in, and you would use one of the sacred plants, tobacco, and perform a cleansing ritual. And so I was doing that like every 2 weeks. I would do that for 4 months. And
Can you say a bit about how, like, why tobacco is used for cleansing, and what is the thought or knowledge behind it being used for cleansing?
yeah, I mean, I haven't done a plant dieta myself, but this is one of the things that if you go deep into the jungle and you start learning, then you'll soon be introduced to plant dietas. And a dieta is basically you going to sit and spend time with individual plants and energetically connecting with that plant. And one of those plant dietas is done with tobacco, because tobacco is a very sacred, very significant plant medicine for a lot of indigenous communities. And so you'll find that the shamans use the tobacco to protect, to cleanse, and speak with the spirit of tobacco, because it's a very strong and significant spirit within the forest and within their practice.
Okay. So you were doing all this learning and translating and being a guide,
Yeah.
and how long were you there doing that?
So I was there for 4 months
Uh-huh.
doing that. So I had my beautiful little simple house next to the river. And yeah, I was just learning about the different plant medicines. And so we would take the same trail actually with each of the groups of volunteers that used to come in every 2 weeks. We would have a new group of volunteers. And so what that meant was that I was able to really learn what these plants look like, what the trees look like, what medicinal properties they're used for. And so then that opened up my senses and my world to like, wow, the jungle is a pharmacy. And one of the statistics I remember was like, 60 to 70% of all modern day pharmaceuticals are born from the forest. And so what that means is that they found the chemical structure of what's in the modern day tablets and pharmaceuticals from the natural structure that is found from one of these plants in the jungle.
And it's usually diluted, right, in the pharmaceutical form.
Yeah, I don't know too much about that. I just
Yeah.
know that it's a chemical equivalent of what is found naturally. And diving a little bit deeper into that, we know that the kind of the modern day pharmaceutical industry kind of covered up all of the natural remedies, because it was not profitable for them
Can't patent them.
for people to know that actually they can go and find this medicine in nature and not have to necessarily pay millions or thousands of dollars to get this treatment, and so they that at that point during history, it got covered up. And anyway, that's one of the reasons why probably as a young girl I didn't know anything about plant medicines, and not necessarily ones that take you on a huge visionary journey, but just everyday plants that help you.
Yeah.
With a cough, or with an eye infection, or with a skin rash, or and so that's what I learned. And so then my curiosity around herbology grew, and what is the natural apothecary, for example, what is a natural pharmacy, and so that's kind of the knowledge that I drew from being there at that point.
Nice. Okay. And you've had quite a few tours down to the Amazon, right? Like 5 or so?
Yeah, exactly. Okay. And in different countries. So I was in Colombian Amazon, I was in Ecuadorian Amazon, and the majority of my time has been within Brazilian Amazon.
Nice.
Yeah, a little bit in Peru.
Great. Before I ask you about the current projects, one thing I'm curious about that is evident just in being with you and hearing you speak is perhaps even more so than anybody I've met, you have this huge, deep regard for nature, right? With so much reverence and love and respect, and it's beautiful. What is it about nature, if you could share with us, that you see that has you relate to it that way?
I think it goes back to that grain of sand, It goes back to that grain of sand where I look at nature and I see all the beauty of the universe everywhere surrounding us, and I see myself. I see the beauty of myself when I see nature, and so whenever I look at nature, I'm like, wow, we're so privileged to live in this way.
Yeah.
And connecting with nature is really just connecting with ourselves at that point,
Yeah.
And connecting with our indigenous cultures, our ancestors, is really just a way of us uncovering those things that we've forgotten, those things that we've left behind, because those ancestors and those indigenous cultures are really the ones that are still largely in touch and intact with that relationship with nature.
Yeah, I can totally see how also in our Western society that connection or relationship with nature got severed. Right.
Yeah,
when I spoke to Darren, and I agreed with him strongly in this point because I experienced this for myself at the beginning of my trip down here in Costa Rica in January, which we're in the beginning of June now in 2021. But yeah, spending those first 2 months in Potrero, Costa Rica, a little town where all there was to do was go grocery shopping and go to the beach. That's all I needed, and then going into the jungle every now and then. Yeah, Darren said if somebody is wondering like what to do with their life, they're not sure what to do, they can't find their purpose or something, like what I would recommend is, like take several days, like close to a week, and like just immerse yourself in nature. And what I see is getting deeply in touch with nature is like getting deeply in touch with yourself. Right. So maybe there is this very ancient, ancestral, or even instinctual relationship or connection that we have with nature that we, for the most part, have lost sight of or lost the sense of, that when we give ourselves that gift of spending that time, that kind of time and immersion in nature, we start to regain it, and therefore we start to get closer to ourselves and our own truth, our own essence.
Yeah, exactly. So that, a disconnection with nature is really a disconnection also with yourself. We are nature. We are one and the same thing. So if you're really missing that element, you're really missing a major part of you as well. And so yeah, take that time. And sometimes it can be difficult. I was in that world as well, you know. I was in a city. I was holding down a great job, and paying the bills and everything like that. But it again that week, those 10 days that I spent climbing Kilimanjaro, I took that time, opened me up. I was like, wow, you know. So go take that trip.
Mm.
Go and explore something, and go and explore yourself at
Mm.
the same, you know, at the same time,
Mm-hmm.
and see what comes out of that.
Mm. Yeah, probably one of the most productive things a human being can do. I would
Yeah,
say.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I heard an interview with a shaman where the shaman said, if you really want to tap in, you need time to do nothing, right? So it's not like be on your own and read a book or listen to music or any of that. Like, no, you really gotta be alone with yourself, and and I would say even in nature, it's even that much more powerful because nature just provides such a beautiful container for that introspection.
Mhm.
And I think it's as you say, right? In a way, it's a mirror as well.
Mhm.
You see the beauty of it, like you see how beautiful it is, just like how we have the privilege to see what we get to see here, which I wish we could show you. But if you're listening, you can't see it, and if you're on video, lighting is terrible if we turn on the camera. But we get to see the ocean from here. This beautiful, luscious mountain. And we're surrounded by butterflies at the moment, by the way.
Yeah.
It's like we live in a
And
butterfly
we have
garden.
pet chameleons.
Yeah, we have
Yeah.
chameleons. The other day I opened the door to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night and I see Rhonda there. I call her Rhonda. This big frog the size of a coconut. So we got froggies here. I mean, it's just so beautiful. So okay, well, great. Thanks for sharing that piece of it. And tell us about your projects now, unless there's something else you think we left out that you'd like to share.
No, I think that was it's a nice lead in. So, after that, just to kind of complete the story, just, then started thinking, well, what else can I do? How can I bridge my 10 years experience in strategic development, and I was very good at it,
Mm-hmm.
to these projects with nature that I'm now so in love with.
Mm-hmm.
And so that led me actually initially to Greenpeace. I didn't stay very long with Greenpeace, but then into Tree Nation. And
Let's hear about Tree Nation. I never heard about Tree Nation before.
yeah, so Tree Nation is a NGO that was conceived in 2006. The founder is Maxime Renounde. And Tree Nation is a platform for reforestation and conservation, and we've planted over 8 million trees. We're working with over 4,000 companies and partnering with those companies to support reforestation projects globally. And we have a database of hundreds of projects, and I think 30 of those are active currently. And so we just provide that channel and that relationship to support reforestation projects and CO2 offset projects um, to support positive impact for the climate. And I've been working with them for just over 2 years now, and that's really healthy for me because what it allows me to do is speak to these big profile companies and have this conversation with them that I'm so passionate about
Mm.
to get them or to work with them to support these projects. And what's happening now, especially within the last year, is that the conversation is actually becoming a lot easier.
Mm.
And so consumers in general across all industries are now saying to the companies that they're working with and the brands that they're buying, what are you doing for the environment? Like what are you doing that's regenerative
Mm.
and not just sustainable anymore, because we can't just sustain at this level. It really has to be regenerative. So we really have to put back more than we take to get us up to a healthy level. that I really enjoy because it does exactly what I wanted to do. It bridged that gap between the corporate world and the conservation world, and then I kept revisiting the Amazon, of course, and so I went back to Brazil and I spent time with indigenous communities. I actually went.
Were you working at your job at Tree Nation when you were visiting the Amazon?
Yeah, so I was working with Tree Nation. Actually, the invitation that brought me back, the most recent, or one of the most recent times, that led me into actually living there for a duration of time was, I was actually at Tree Nation HQ, which is in Barcelona in Spain, and I got an invitation from a friend of mine to go to the World Ayahuasca Conference, which was in Girona, which is not very far away. It was like a half an hour train ride, and so I said okay, and we were doing a a gallery of works for the World Ayahuasca Conference. And so when I had gotten to there was obviously Indigenous representation. There was representation from some of the world's most leading uh, kind of doctors and psychotherapists, etc. And so they're looking at these medicines and understanding how they can be brought into the world in the best way to help people outside of anyone within the Amazon. So bringing it into the Western world, what's the best way to do that? How do we introduce it? And so, of course, I was listening to all of these amazing scientists and their opinions, and then I also sat with Indigenous groups, and I said, okay, what you're helping us in so many ways by bringing this medicine to us. What can we do for you? And one of the things that they said to me was, well, we really want help regenerating the land because, of course, there's huge scale deforestation. The territories are being invaded, they're being deforested, and so they want help protecting and conserving and also regenerating. And so I said, well, okay, I can probably help with that. I work for an international organization that supports reforestation projects. And I got a couple of invitations, one from the Hunuqueen and one from the Awanawa, to go and visit in the Amazon in Brazil. And so I did.
You just got these invitations.
Yeah.
How did they know to reach out to you? Like, how did they know you?
I mean, I was speaking to them on a one-on-one basis, and so at this conference there was the room full of Indigenous elders and the Indigenous political representatives, and so I had spoken to them within the room and said, if there's anything that I can do to support you, these are my skills, this is my experience, please let me know. And so after that, I did have a few people come up to me and say, we would really like your help. Do you want to come and see us? You're invited to come and see us. And so I think it was a few months after that, I took the decision to go to Brazil and go and visit these communities that I had been invited to. And that opened up a whole new world because then I started to live in the communities. And so, yes, I was still working in unison and in parallel with that with Tree Nation. I went to go and visit the Yawanawa with Laura and Tashka Yawanawa, and I now have a project with Sarah Yawanawa. And I spent time with the Hunuqueen, and I lived with the Hunuqueen for a year. I left, and then I went back.
Who are the Hunuqueen?
The Hunuqueen and the Yawanawa are two different indigenous tribes, indigenous communities that live within the state of Acre. Acre in Brazil. Acre has, I think, the most density of indigenous populations within Brazil, and so there's also the Kuntanawa and the Shananawa and a lot Ashaninka, different indigenous tribes. Okay, but I spent most of my time with the Yawanawa and the Hunuqueen, and I was immersed in that community, and I lived within Binuya, which is the Hunuqueen village close to the city of Tarauacá. And during that time, I realized that although these communities needed help, they weren't quite in the position to be to work with Tree Nation. And why? It's because Tree Nation need certain things to be already in place. They need a certain level of infrastructure to have an assurances and keep the assurances and keep the trust with these high profile organizations that they're working with. And the indigenous communities just weren't reaching those prerequisites. Even though they're obviously the masters of taking care of the forest, it's just not quite within that world. And so what I realized is that, okay, well, you need some of the basics first. Okay, so you need a tree nursery if you're going to reforest and plant using agroforestry techniques, which agroforestry techniques means to plant fruit bearing or food bearing trees. But mostly I was just there to observe, okay, and then what I realized is that they needed help with these just really foundational things before they were able to be at a level to be accepted as a project, either with Tree Nation or with another organization that's working at those kind of levels to give them support. And so, before Futuro Nativo was even in my mind or on my radar, I started working to collect funds to build tree nurseries. And so we just built one with the Yawanawa in the Shukuvena village with Sarah Yawanawa, and we're just about to build the second tree nursery with the Pinuya village in Hunukuin, with the Hunukuin. And those projects are really the ones that are close to my heart, because the indigenous communities are really the people who are bringing that medicine and who are the ancient wisdom keepers and holders of those medicines. And ayahuasca and the plant medicines had given me so much and opened my eyes to so much and changed my life forever, that I really wanted to be of service and give something back to those communities that are looking and taking care of the forest and have always been doing that and have always lived in balance with nature. And I have a reverence to them for that. And so I was like, wow, what can I do from my heart to your heart? And this is the best way that I found that I could do that. So I created Futuro Nativo, which in English it means native future. And the essence of that is really to, what does our future look like? Well, it should be from our indigenous roots, right? Because they're the ones who are taking care of nature in the best way. So let's look at the past and bring that into our future.
I love that.
So Futuro Nativo was born, and it also includes projects, women's projects for women's collectives, and supporting different artisan workers, and also music production. So we teamed up with Agami Records and Agami Seeds of Light to produce not-for-profit music sales. That and the sale of those tracks, the money generated from those sales is put directly back into these kinds of projects. So Agami Seeds of Light have been one of the donors towards the projects that I'm now supporting through Futuro Nativo. And that and that continues. We're also doing living plant libraries, which is basically, we were talking about the natural pharmacy. It's creating an educational facility which is with the living plants in the facility, to understand what are the medicinal properties of all of these plants while they're living, so you can walk up to them and know, oh yeah, that's good for this and that's good for this. So before you dry it out, before you put it into a tea, what does it look like really in the forest, so that you can identify it, because that kind of knowledge comes from the ancestors and the elders of these indigenous communities that are in the Amazon, and so we're trying to preserve that with these plant libraries.
Amazing. Wow. So many amazing projects that you're up to. I can't believe it's already been the full hour of hearing your story, and I feel like we're just getting started. There's so much more I'd love to ask you. I think I'm definitely going to invite you to do a part 2 so we can continue this conversation. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, yes, of course. I'm happy to share.
Amazing. What would you say now, Pippa? Like, if somebody is hearing this and it really resonates with them, and they're right there with you, where they want to help regenerate the land, do something um, towards reforesting, to stop deforestation. What can people do? How can they support you in this?
First of all, I would say to them to look locally
Mm-hmm.
in the first instance, because if they can touch a local project, then that's going to give them more of a connection immediately. And then think a little bit macro and think, okay, well, what's happening on a global scale?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then look at different organizations that
Mm-hmm.
are involved with preservation, conservation of the land, and regeneration of the land. So, of course, Tree Nations is an example of that.
Mm-hmm.
And then, specifically, regards earth guardianship and land stewardship, look at the projects that we have with Futuro Nativo as examples.
What's
And
the website?
it's www.futuronativo.org.
Futuronativo.org. All right, I'll link that.
Yeah. Just take a look on there and see what resonates with you, and because these are the projects that are going with a direct line
Mm-hmm.
into those indigenous communities. So just have a think about what calls to you the most, what makes your heart sing, and then follow that.
That's a good way to go about it. Amazing. Is there anything else you'd like to share before we close?
I think just one very simple practice that I recommend to people, which is it's very easy. And so because we talked a lot about connecting with ourselves and connecting with nature. Okay, so one very simple, very quick practice that I invite you to do is during your day, take 5-10 minutes, go and sit on the ground. So not on anything concrete, something that's actually touching the ground. Sit on the ground and close your eyes and put your left hand on your heart and put your right hand on the ground. And just take a few deep breaths here. Connecting the heart to the ground. And just seeing how you feel, just even with a few minutes of doing that. And then I invite you to continue that practice. So left hand on the heart, right hand on the ground.
What a beautiful practice. You know what? The Akashic record reader that I had my first and only consultation with in December 18th, 2020, I'm never going to forget that conversation that pretty much altered the course of my life. Day before my last ayahuasca ceremony, she said, and I told her, I guess I see how even in ceremony sometimes I'm always trying to understand what I'm seeing and rationalize and observe the environment and the pyrotechnics of the journey experience. And she says, yeah, don't do that. Put one hand on your heart, one hand on the earth, and say, I don't want to understand, I want to heal.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that. I took that as my mantra the following day and my ceremony, and it led me here.
Yay!
Yeah. So I'm so grateful to you. I'm so happy that you came on to the Love is Our Nature podcast, and I'm so happy that I get to learn so much from you in so many different levels, from the kitchen to just reverence with nature, and you embody it so well. So thank you.
Thank you.
Is there any contact information that you want to share with people besides your website, that if they want to follow you, stay in touch, support you?
Yeah, you can link to me on Instagram. my personal account is at Vida Florestral,
Mm-hmm.
and the Futuro Nativo account at Futuro Nativo,
Mm-hmm.
and also Tree Nation at tree-nation.org.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
All right. Well, I hope you enjoyed this episode. Hope to see you again soon and have a wonderful day. Go sit for 5 minutes, one hand on your heart, one hand on the earth. Just take some deep breaths. It's beautiful. Bye, everybody.